Hello everyone and welcome back to SHOYOUCAN, the channel dedicated to all things Capcom, from their games, comics, and movies. So if you love Capcom as much as I do, then think about subscribing or dropping a like. It would be much appreciated. In today's wonderful video, we go back to the series Star Gladiator, Capcom's 3D Street Fighter and first attempt at making a 3D fighting game. More specifically, we're looking at the main female lead, June, and her story. As was just mentioned, June is from the fighting game series Star Gladiator. Her full name is June Lynn Milliam. Birthday is 2331 and birthplace is Hong Kong. Her height is 5'4" and her weight is about 108 pounds. Now, like most of the Star Gladiator cast, June has a very unique appearance that stands out with its creativity and style. June has long brunette hair in a hime style, and where the fringes are cut straight, while her side bangs are tapered to curl at her cheeks. In some depictions, the bangs are merely cut diagonally. Her locks are held up with plasma power based green tech hair tiles, and her look is very much a futuristic take on the Chinese oxhorn hair bun styles. June wears a futuristic silken pink kipao with striking, extravagant, and artistic features found on rhythmic athletics wear in performance sports like gymnastics and figure skating, and appears to be made for mobility and performance. Even though June has a happy-go-lucky outlook and a kind and cheerful personality, she can also bear a passive-aggressive attitude and a rather sassy and condescending streak when under stress or upset. She hides deep within her soul her inner pain and sadness, including the pain of having to lose the people that she had loved the most, and an anger that can turn into an unstoppable vengeance. Though she masks her inner conflict well, she may come to vent with the less than pleasant aspects of herself, or at worst, become impulsive to where she disregards her own life without second thought. Despite this, she longs for a place in the hearts of others to belong to, and firmly believes in justice. She is a young British-Chinese female rhythmic gymnast who is among one of the most talented gymnasts in the world. Enrolling into the Star Gladiator program, she fights with her plasma power through her plasma ring and graceful dancing martial arts skills against the Fourth Empire, personally vowing to avenge her parents' death at Bill Steen's hands. Originally hailing from Hong Kong, June was the daughter of Michael Lynn Milliam, a British science professor of one of the nation's prestigious universities, and Ellen Milliam, her mother of Mandarin descent. Once June became 14, though, her life had changed for the worst, as Hong Kong would be swept into a second cultural revolution that would spread from mainland China. Forced to return home from school during practice for a nationwide gymnastics competition, June and her mother would be forced to take refuge in their house, with her father pursued by rioters and upstarts who targeted anyone that did not fit their vision for a new future China. After a month, June and her mother would receive a letter from a family friend that let them know her father was safe, and that a plan was in store to have them migrate to the United Kingdom. Without hesitation, the Milliams would reunite in Victoria Harbor and forced away from the nation they once called home. Arriving in exile into the UK, Michael was left with no other choice of work but from within the laboratories of Dr. Edward Bilstein, and would be forced to separate from his family once again in order to support them. Though half a year later, June's father was killed in a laboratory accident, and the news of his death caused her mother to emotionally break down into severe neurotic depression and become bedridden. Visiting the laboratory immediately after the accident, June then came around her father's workstation to help clean out his desk and take any family keepsakes, but was mystified at the sight and behaviors of her father's co-workers, who showed signs of workplace abuse both physically and mentally. It was only after finding a forced written confession by her father, stained eerily in his blood, claiming that all that had transpired in the laboratory prior to the major accident were just workplace incidents, and through her maternal uncle who had held a high position in the Earth Federation military, secretly revealed to her that her father was definitely murdered by Bilstein via experimentation, and that his death was one of many by Bilstein's hands. As the case went on, June and her mother learned that Bilstein would be tried for workplace and human rights abuses, now rather than the death of her father and the others. The charges were bittersweet and an indirect form of justice for June. Immediately after, June had begun to check up on her mother, but she mysteriously was not home. Even as nighttime passed, Ellen did not return home. June had went to the police and filed a missing persons report for her mother, but days later she had received a house visit from the police and was escorted to a morgue to identify a body that was found washed up near the river. June confirmed it was Ellen, her mother, who had overdosed on drugs and threw herself in the river to drown herself, unable to cope with the death of her husband and her traumatic exile from her home nation. Within the span of a year, at the age of 14, June was forced to support herself on her own. 3 years had passed, and upon hearing of Bilstein again after his escape and declaration of universal domination, June would break down emotionally. While sadness and despair nearly saw her to commit suicide, a fire in her heart soon coursed widely in turn. June would declare that no more would any other suffer like she did, and that determined anger would see June live to get revenge against the mad scientist and his newly formed Fourth Empire. Arranging to see her uncle and have him file a mercenary recommendation to the Earth Federation forces, June was able to join Project Star Gladiator and follow her pursuit of vengeance. Now, during the Project Star Gladiator tournament, June came across Rimgall, a human-turned velociraptor from the experiments of Bilstein. She was unaware that her father was in fact Rimgall, who, in his velociraptor dinosaur form, had then jumped to his death from the top of the Fourth Empire flying fortress, so that he could ensure that his inner feral beast wouldn't get the chance and opportunity to hurt his daughter and her friends. After Bilstein's defeat, June felt that she had nothing else to live for and tried to commit suicide through the use of a drug overdose. But Hayato had managed to stop her in the end and remind June that he and the rest of their friends had cared very much for her. Upon hearing of this, June had realized that she still had much to live for and is determined to look forward to the future so she could spend the rest of her life with Hayato and the others from within a state of peace and happiness. And pretty much there you have it. The sad story of June, but in the end, happy ending. At first seeing her design, you quickly come to the conclusion that she's just another Chun-Li clone, especially when you learn her request for vengeance. June, though, is actually very different from Chun-Li and really stands on her own. Her backstory, for one, is far more detailed and dark, and they really delve into the loneliness and uneasiness and unhappiness she felt when dealing with her parents. In fact, she even went as far as several times to kill herself. Chun-Li, they never quite delved that deep into it. Now, you understood she was sad from her father's death, but they never showed the pure pain she had to go through. June herself battles with depression and loneliness, something that's also very, very different from Chun-Li. But because of these similarities, Chun-Li did get a June costume in Street Fighter V, which was really nice of Capcom to do to kind of remind us of this character. June would go on to make a number of cameo appearances through Capcom's games, and even made an appearance in Project X Zone 2 for the 3DS. Now, according to Capcom, June was supposed to make an appearance in the fantastic crossover game Tatsunoko vs. Capcom for the Nintendo Wii, but she didn't make the cut at the last minute. Now, some were thinking it was because she was too close to Jun or June the Swan, and even had a very sounding similar name. Either way, I think it would have been cool and was definitely a missed opportunity to include one of these Capcom classic characters. I think June is honestly one of the more interesting characters from Star Gladiator. In fact, I even consider her story far more interesting than Hayato, the main series protagonist. She has a very vibrant design and interesting style of combat. Her story is sad and depressing, but it makes you root for her and want to succeed. She is definitely one of the better characters in Capcom lore, and I wish they would give us so much more. That does it, guys. If you enjoyed that story, as always, please like and subscribe, and there'll be plenty more where that came from. I want you all to take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.